Hello everyone and welcome to this live broadcast on Twitter. We normally do these on Facebook, but we thought we'd take a break from Facebook and come on Twitter instead. My name's Rich, I work for the University of Cambridge Museums and we are in one of those today. Hannah, why don't you just have a quick look around, show people this incredible collection. As you can all probably tell, well I hope you can, we're in the Museum of Zoology here in Cambridge. We're here for a very special reason today. Today we're going to be talking about some LGBTQ plus tours, some pilot tours that we've been running across 4 of the museums. These tours, they started in December, they end at the end of February, at the end of this month. And they also happen in the Polar Museum, Museum of Classical Archaeology and the Fitzwilliam Museum. Now later on at 3 p.m. we'll be talking to Jasmine at 3 p.m. so do join us for that as well. But we're really lucky because today we've got Tim with us. Tim leads the tours here at the Zoology Museum. So before we talk to Tim, and he's going to tell us a little bit about, or give us a snippet of the tours that he does here, you should know you can also comment. This is live, unless you're not watching it live, but you'll know if you are. So you can ask any questions. Do put them in the comments and Hannah will look out for them and ask them for you. So without further ado, hello Tim.
Hello. Hi.
Thank you for joining us today. It's really pleased to have you.
Thanks very much.
No problem. And so we're in the Zoology Museum. You run the LGBTQ plus tours here. What was it that made you want to do the tours?
Well, I work at the Fitzwilliam Museum, so not here actually, but in the Fitzwilliam I do some education work at weekends, and I've really enjoyed that side of museum work, sharing stories, sharing the knowledge that's contained in museums with our visitors, and I really like doing it with trying to reach new audiences with that, and trying to bring in people who might not necessarily feel like museums are the place for them, who aren't necessarily interested in them, or who feel perhaps even excluded from them. So when I saw these tours, which was an opportunity to engage with the LGBTQ plus community and celebrate some of the individuals that have contributed to the UCM collections, individuals from that community, I thought that was the perfect way to do those things that I love doing in my museum work. Yeah.
Brilliant, brilliant. Now, obviously, the collections here are extremely different to the collections at Fitzwilliam, where
Yes.
you work. So what's that been like? It's a whole new collection to work with.
Yeah, it is. So I work at the Fitz. I'm not a zoologist, I'm not a biologist. My background's in history and languages. So I've been learning too. I was given a pack of research and information that I've been learning, and it's been really interesting for me because it's a totally new experience for me too. All the research was done by Dan Vo, who I'm sure you'll talk about in a bit, and was then checked by the curators here at the museum. So it's all A-OK info. But it's nice to not to be an expert, interestingly, because I suppose then the tours feel more like a discussion and less like a lecture, which means I get some really interesting responses from the people who come on them, and I think perhaps they feel like they can talk to me and I'm kind of on the same level as them, learning as well, you know.
Brilliant, yeah, it's really good.
Yeah.
And you mentioned Dan Vo. I should give Dan a shout out actually, because he obviously started tours like this at the V&A, and we invited him to come to the university's collections to explore what stories were here. So it's been incredible really, hasn't it? Because it has drawn out some really interesting sort of research and stories from these collections that perhaps we weren't talking about before. Hannah, you have your hand up.
We have a comment from Taylor. He says it's a great idea for creating an experience for visitors. So
excellent.
Hi, Taylor.
Nice one, Taylor. Right, so this is the bit I was excited about because I don't have to do too much talking now. Tim, you're going to just give us a sort of snippet of a tour that you run here.
Yeah.
I should say actually the tours are pretty much fully booked, apart from classical archaeology where you might be able to sneak some tickets. So if you're interested, do have a look for those. But Tim, what were you going to talk to us about today?
Okay, so I was going to talk to you about penguins, and you can see one here behind me in this case. This is an emperor penguin. Now, you might not be surprised that I'm talking to you about penguins because partly because they're on all the marketing for the Bridging Binaries tours, but also because they've been in the news quite a lot recently over the last couple of years. Because same-sex penguin couples are being found in a lot of zoos in Europe and also the US and North America. And there was one particularly famous example in, I think, New York Zoo, where two male penguins nurtured an egg. They adopted the egg and raised the chick, and the chick was called Tango. And two authors in the US wrote a children's picture book called And Tango Makes Three about this story, which generated this enormous and really strange and inexplicable outrage or backlash, where people were saying that the book was promoting homosexuality. And the authors, of course, responded that they're no more promoting homosexuality than they are sleeping on a rock and eating raw fish. So, you know, really strange. But I'll leave you to read about that. I wanted to mention that same-sex penguin couples have been, and homosexual behaviour in penguins, has been observed for quite a long time. And it's actually remarkable how recently this has come into the public consciousness. Back in 1912, on the Scott Antarctic expedition, a man named George Levick spent some time observing Adelie penguins in Antarctica. And he wrote a paper called The Sexual Habits of Adelie Penguins. And he was so shocked by what he found that he wrote the paper only in ancient Greek, so that only educated men could read it, because of course it wasn't fit for the general public. And he only put there, I think only 100 copies were made in the end. And then it was hidden away until about 2012, when it was rediscovered in archives somewhere. So really, a real effort to keep this secret. He does observe some nasty sexual habits like harassment or gangs or even necrophilia, but he lumps in homosexual behaviour with all this. And he writes, there's one funny passage where he observes a male penguin finish mating. He dismounts, only for his partner to swap places with him and mount him. And Levick writes, whereupon the nature of their proceeding was disclosed. So that's shocking stuff, obviously. But this is a common theme, and even in the 20th century, Edinburgh Zoo in the first half of the 20th century kept changing the names of its penguins really rapidly because they kept pairing off in same-sex couples, and it didn't want its visitors to know. So Charles becomes Caroline, and Beatrice becomes Bernard, and all that kind of thing. Now they think that in captivity, at least, where statistics are more easily made or discovered, 1 in 5 emperor penguin couples are same-sex. That's quite a lot. So it's interesting that this has only recently become something where lots of us are conscious of. There's a researcher called Bruce Bagmeal, whose book Biological Exuberance came out in the late 90s, and it really ruffled feathers. In it, he categorises hundreds of species of animals which exhibit homosexual behaviour or have been observed engaging in homosexual behaviour in the wild. And he identifies and criticises the fact that scientists have for so long haven't been confronting this or dealing with this issue head on and talking about it and discussing homosexual behaviour in animals, and or have been kind of explaining it away in euphemisms like same-sex behaviour with male animals being kind of dominance behaviour or something like that. And Bruce Bagmeal also deplores the invasive treatments that have been given to animals in captivity when they've been observed exhibiting homosexual behaviour, including castration, hormone therapy, electric shock treatment, awful, awful things. So he's a really interesting researcher, and that was my snippet of my tour. That's a little bit of what I did on these tours. I hope that's all right.
That was brilliant. Thank you so much, Tim. That's really, really interesting.
Okay,
I
good.
can't help but feel really sorry for those penguins in the zoo who keep having their name changed.
Yeah, I know.
And, I mean, that would just be
Very
really confusing.
Yeah.
Probably fighting over the fish as a result.
Definitely.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's fascinating. And I presume that obviously that is one sort of facet of the stories you talk about here.
Yeah.
I mean, as we sort of look around this enormous room, what else do you sort of talk about which other sort of animals are within your tour?
Well, I suppose briefly I talk a bit about giraffes and homosexual behaviour in giraffes, and happens quite a lot. I think one study found that 94% of sexual activity in giraffes observed was homosexual. 94%.
Wow.
So that's a lot. And there's a researcher called Anne Innes-Dagg who's done a lot on, or did a lot on giraffes. Research, went out into the wild and researched them, observed them, and she's wicked. She's a great advocate for LGBTQ plus rights as well. So I talk about her a bit.
Excellent.
Yes, do we have
So we have a question. So what is the nature of the kind of the guests' reactions or interactions with you as you deliver the tour?
Well, I am always keen for them to talk with me, to discuss things, to share their opinions and experiences as we go along. So not just at the end, or not just after every section, but whenever. And that's been quite good. And I have got, sometimes people are shy, but other times they'll ask, or actually often I learn a lot. So after I talked about the kind of cover-up of research on penguins, one visitor said something about they'd found that BBC Bristol or something had this archive which had been kind of covered up for ages because it was about homosexual behaviour that had been observed in animals and hadn't been shared with people, and I found that a really interesting thing that I didn't know, so it's great learning from the people who come on the tours too. Yeah.
Brilliant. It just made me think of how in terms of there's a lot of volunteers that are helping us to run these tours, and we're really pleased with the variety of sort of backgrounds they came from, and the different sort of interests you all have. And I was just thinking, what have you noticed in terms of the sort of people coming on the tours? Is it quite a sort of varied group of people?
It is. It has been quite varied so far. As I say, I've only done 2, but there have been others at the Zoology done by Becky and Holly, who also do them. And so far, I've had all ages. I mean, not young kids, but I've had definitely students in their first years. I've had people in their 30s, 40s, possibly even some people in their 50s, and I'm sure others have had even wider ranges than that as well. So that's nice to get the age range. And not all of them are students or from the university or from the museum. Some of them have come in possibly into the zoology for the first time ever.
Excellent. Just
for this tour. So that's nice that we are bringing in some more people who wouldn't otherwise come in.
Definitely, which is what we want. Thank you so much. That's been really interesting. And like I said earlier, we are going to be talking to some more of the volunteers, 3 p.m. today at the Fitzwilliam Museum, but also we hope to do a few more in the coming weeks. But yeah, that was great, Tim. It's really, really interesting.
Yeah, just a taster.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, there might still be some tickets left at Classical Archaeology. They're free, so really try and get along to there. And I think that's probably us done for today. So thank you very much, everyone, and we'll see you.